We saw F1 announce that they're coming to Las Vegas in 2023. Everyone in all of motorsports talking about this deal. And these guys, I mean, we can't touch what they're doing right now as far as promotion and visibility and just the way they handle it. But it makes you dream that we could one day have this for drag racing.
Did you see
You
how
got it dreamt
Wes's
out.
did
Yeah.
you see how Wes's post blew up?
Yeah, I did.
You
That's
know,
what I was getting to. Yep. Wes made a post. If you guys haven't seen it on Facebook, go find it, where he asked basically that question: how can we make this happen for drag racing, where we're doing some spectacle on the Las Vegas Strip, or we've got all this hype around it? And it was a firestorm of comments and
I was blown away,
suggestions.
to be totally honest, man. I mean, there was like people, I mean, like Real Racer, like Scott Palmer, Top Fuel superstar, Pro Mod superstar, chimed in that he's down. Alex Laughlin chimed in that he was down. Scott Woody
tell me what you
Woodruff
wanted
from
to do, Wes.
Jegs
Tell everybody what you
chimed
wanted to
in.
do.
Basically, I just said on social, and I've been trying to be a little more active on social media. All you guys are on my ass all the time about being more active on social, so I'm trying. And I'm like, isn't this show enough? I do it every week, but apparently it's not. But anyways, I just made a post and kind of posed the question that if Formula One, I mean, not if Formula One is going to Las Vegas in 2023, the fall of 2023. I don't think the date's been announced, but sometime in November, we're thinking it's going to be around Thanksgiving. And the Las Vegas Grand Prix is going to happen. And I just basically said out loud on my Facebook page that it would be a shame if that event comes and goes and there's not some publicity stunt organized for a Top Fuel car, a funny car, a pro stock car, a pro mod car to do a burnout down Las Vegas Boulevard. I mean, it's going to have barriers up. It's going to have all the same. I mean, they're going to have put all the pieces in place to hold a Formula One race, right? So I'm sure the road's going to be closed for a pretty significant amount of time. And if there's not an opportunity some way, somehow to get, can you imagine the value that a video of John Force doing a burnout in front of the fountains at the Bellagio would have, or Erica Enders in that red Camaro, or Stevie Jackson in a Pro Mod car? And there's some tie-ins there because Bahrain hosts the Bahrain International Circuit, hosts a Formula One event. Bahrain sponsors a Pro Mod car. Maybe there's a way to make that happen. I don't know. But it just seems to me like it would be an opportunity lost to not get those photos, get that footage, because that's the type of footage that would find its way onto ESPN, find its way, would go viral, in my opinion, on social media or on YouTube. And I think we just need to lean into as many of those opportunities as we have. And it's kind of a great way to book in today's conversation, because it goes back to Brian Loans calling the Howard Stern show. Like, someone's going to have to start ringing phones and calling people. And I know that there are people willing to do it, right? There are people willing to do some of the legwork. It's going to take a group of people, but it does seem like it would be an absolute tragedy to have that event come and go and not find some way to take advantage of it. And I mean, this is something that's very common. It's piggybacking on other people's success. I mean, Donald Long, used that term constantly, and people would get a little bit salty about it and take offense to it, but it's true. He invented Radio versus the World, and then all these guys piggybacked on it. And it's true. Everybody started putting on Radio versus the World races, right? I mean, it started popping up everywhere. And it's part of it. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it. You have to understand that you run the risk of diluting it. You run the risk of not doing it as well as they do. There's all these risks associated with it. But I mean, it's part of the world. I mean, there are companies, Apple makes an iPhone and then this company makes a case for it, or makes a charger for it, or makes a camera lens for it. Yeah. So, I mean, in my opinion, we have to piggyback on Formula One and the largest motorsport in the world. We have to piggyback on them doing everything that they've done and doing all the legwork and spending all the money and all the time to put on the Las Vegas Grand Prix. If we allow that moment to come and go without finding a way for drag racing to have its 15 minutes of fame or its moment in the sun, I think it'll be a failure, dude. I really do.
There's got to be enough crossover between all the people involved in F1 and in drag racing. There has to be enough connections or something at this point. You mentioned a couple. There were some pretty high-powered people commenting on your post as well that they were interested in it and could possibly help with some connections. I think we've got enough time now too. We've obviously got a year and a half to make this happen. And it's going to take that long. And it's something that needs to start in planning and get in people's in the top of their mind right now so that we can make this happen. I agree with you. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think the drag racing, because it's such a prideful sport and has that mentality that, no, we don't want anything to do with that. We don't want to piggyback on F1 or, their cars or nothing. There's a little bit of that mentality. Maybe they have that mentality also over on F1. They wouldn't want us involved in anything they're doing, but I think that's a scarcity mentality. And I think that there's definitely something that could happen with that.
I hope that someone's willing to make that effort. I know that there's clearly the racers, there's some interest on the racing side. I would have to think that it would be valuable to a lot of these sponsors. We were talking about Napa earlier. I can't imagine that footage. I think that the way I would put it together is if I was NHRA, I would find a way to say, hey, we will help organize this. We're going to need some help covering expenses and whatnot, and get people to basically pay to be involved in this publicity stunt where you go to some of your teams and say, hey, we're only going to have a couple of cars. We're only going to have a limited amount of time. So we will give you this 20-second time slot or whatever. You bring your own camera crew. NHRA would obviously have their own camera crew, I'm sure, and their own people. But I think you would want to offer up opportunities, and probably, to the highest bidder goes those opportunities, right? Hit up your sponsors and hit up your pro level teams and say, hey, we've got X amount of inventory of spots. We want one funny car burnout, one top fuel burnout, or whatever they're going to do, and get everybody involved, get everybody invested. And I don't think these people are afraid to spend money. Clearly, they're racing top fuel and funny car. They're drag racing at the NHRA pro level. I think that you would be surprised how many people would rally around that opportunity, and that material, the video content, the photos would live on forever. And I do want to take this minute before we wrap up.
Before you start,
okay, go ahead.
The whole thing though, like the whole post, one thing I took away from it was how many people in drag racing have watched that Formula One Drive to Survive show, and how many people are
JT's great with names.
Oh yeah, I'm awesome. Yeah.
Drive to Strive. That's
Drive to Strive. We're doing the Kings. I point above all else. It's not no prep. It's not no time. It's not 8th Mile. It's not the tracks they go to. It's not the cars they race. It's the characters.
Yep.
The United States specifically, we love a story. We love a good character. We want someone to follow. I think that's how Donald Trump got elected. I think that's what's the Ukraine president's name? I'm drawing blank on it. That's terrible.
Zelensky.
Yeah, Vladimir Zelensky. He's become an international icon, right? And I think it's because we've gotten to know him. He's been in front of a camera. He's talking all the time. We've learned who he is, and the whole world has rallied around the country of Ukraine because of him, right?
Not really.
Not the whole world, but there's a whole lot of people that have, right? You've got people coming out of the woodwork. Everywhere you go, there's buildings with the Ukrainian flag hanging on them. It's an incredible show of solidarity for the most part, supporting the people of Ukraine. And I think it starts with a charismatic leader. Their president has the world has fallen in love with him, right? And obviously not the entire world, but a whole lot of people have fallen in love with that character. And I think that's what Netflix brought to the table when they introduced Drive to Survive, the Formula One documentary, right? You about got me. I about said Drive to Strive. Yeah. But I really think we were introduced to all these drivers. We were introduced to crew chiefs. We were introduced to team managers and all these people. We started to put faces to names. We got to see how they handled situations. We got to see how they interacted with one another. We got to see how they sound when they talk, how they dress, how they treat people. And we started taking sides. We started picking favorites, right? And that has made all the difference in the world. And it's not like Formula One hasn't been wildly successful for a long, long time. It's the biggest motorsports in the world, but it never really took root in America. And I think it's because we didn't know the characters. We didn't know the cast. Nobody had introduced drivers.
There were no American drivers.
History.
So
right?
we didn't have that. We didn't have that to grasp onto. I also think that F1, think about how many shows we have, like ESPN shows and stuff that cover basketball, football, baseball. Yeah. There's really not a lot that cover racing. And I think that, and if they do, it's like, NASCAR covers their own deal. NHRA covers their own deal. F1 doesn't really have that in the States. I think they have more exposure and coverage in these other, like via Sky Network and things like
Yeah.
that in Europe to get more opportunity. And it's kind of in our defense. It was our only opportunity to meet these characters
Sure.
was through this Netflix documentary. And I also think it's super fascinating how, like you said, especially in America, that's what we gravitate toward is heroes. And that continues. We see it over and over in corporate America, like Steve Jobs at Apple or the dude at WeWork. There's been multiple documentaries on him and how that one crazy
charismatic leader, dude.
character
There are books
drives
written
the
about this.
company.
Behind almost every meaningful movement in the history of the world is a singular charismatic leader. Seriously. I mean, you can go down the list. There are
Good or
tons,
bad.
good or bad, right? I mean, and a charismatic leader, and I can make some drag racing examples. And there's 2 points I want to make. First off, talking about the Formula One docuseries on Netflix, another example of Formula One taking matters into their own hands. Right. I mean, I know that they were involved in the financing of that programming. They've had a deep involvement in it. And I think it's kudos to them for knowing what needed to happen in order to capture the attention, capture the imagination of an American audience. Right. I think that was part of their move was to how can we make this sport, this motorsport more mainstream in America? And they knew they had to introduce our country and our population to these characters and these people and educate us. And they knew it wasn't going to happen overnight. Now they're in their 4th season, and I mean it's never been hotter. Formula One is as hot as it's ever been, and it doesn't seem to be losing momentum. And it's crazy because I actually got a press release from somebody in Formula One the other day that was talking about how much that show had grown all these drivers' social media. I think Max Verstappen's, the reigning champion, the show has grown his social media presence like tenfold, right? I mean, he went from having like 1 million followers to 10 million followers on the back of that show. And it goes on down the list. Even the guys that don't have massive followings have much more significant followings now than they did before the show. So it goes to show you the value of that type of programming, what it can do for you and what it can do for your business. And I think that you got to give respect to these groups and these organizations and these businesses and whatever that take matters into their own hands. And that's clearly, in my opinion, what Formula One has done with the Drive to Survive show. And they deserve any success that comes from it. They absolutely deserve. The second point that I wanted to make on it is completely escaping me right now. So somebody else talk.
I can't believe the money that's over there in F1. I mean,
yeah,
I threw the numbers out before, but what was it like? $800
$1 billion, basically,
for a year, and then the lesser teams was around like 400 million or something like that.
And they crashed one of those cars, and it's totaled. It's like multi-million dollars.
And then you look at their setups at the
and
tracks.
They tear that stuff up a lot.
Yeah, and the setups at the tracks for the teams, you're like, what is that? Because it's like,
how do you get?
It's like, what is that? Is it a transformer?
It is a transformer. Most of those trailers like flip open and they become floors, and there's multiple decks. It's really, really, really impressive.
Those have to be hauled in. There has to be like a dozen rigs for each team, right? And then they assemble it like Legos at every track, and then disassemble it.
Super cool.
I mean, that's wild, and it looks all like seamless and perfect, like it's all glass and modern. I mean, that deal's wild.
I love that stuff. To be honest with you guys,
that deal is awesome.